Welcome back to UAP Rant. This is episode 14 in the podcast series. And for those that have been following the previous episode, we were having a discussion about the relationship between James Clerk Maxwell and Albert Einstein. I was trying to bring up the point that when Maxwell was around and knew Einstein, that he had this quaternion notation for his electricity equations. So that was his original work, and what we have now with his four equations is not actually his equations. They were modified. So we were going back to Maxwell's original quaternion notation and talking about how Einstein really highly valued Maxwell's work and stood on his shoulders when he developed his theory of general relativity and theory of special relativity. And because Maxwell died 30 years before his time, he never really got to consolidate his position in the world of physics. And I was alluding to the fact that Einstein ended up calling the fourth dimension time, and mainly because of the key point about the limitations of the speed of light, and that led him on to talking about time dilation and gravity, and how there was a limit to the observable universe in terms of physics, and this fixed term of the speed of light. Now he eventually replaced Maxwell's electro-magnetic universe with general relativity and special relativity, of course. So I want to build on that a little bit more today, because we're linking that back to UAP and UFOs and how they work and might transit four-dimensional space. But I was trying to allude to the fact that if we resurrect the complexity of Maxwell's quaternion notation that linked four-space geometric potentials to three-space vectors as a field, which of course validated Faraday's work on the theory, on field theory, quantitatively or mathematically. So that Maxwell was a genius for this sort of stuff. But what I was trying to get at was that if Einstein hadn't called the fourth dimension time, so that we had space-time, space is three-dimensional, time is four-dimensional, and we flip it, so we have time-space, so we have time four-dimensional, space three-dimensional, and then instead of time-space, we replace time with electric space, space being electric and four-dimensional, so just called electric space. That perhaps, what I'm saying is perhaps that would have happened if Maxwell hadn't have died of cancer 30 years before his time. And in having these discussions and debates with the physics fraternity and the leading minds of the time, that he might have won out over Einstein and called it electric space instead of having the term space-time now that we have. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to bring it back to UAPs, UFOs, interdimensional anomalies again shortly. But originally it was the electromagnetic atom, right? So we had a field-based theory in how atoms were energy, which and the waveform collapsed to matter, and then you've got subatomic particles which spin, and they have the spin rates of your electrons and the spin of the atom. So that sort of concept inspired Lorentz and Fitzgerald to suggest there was length contraction, and when we had Planck and the Planck length as well. We had introduced time dilation of orbiting charges as well from Lamore, I think it was. So there were radical changes to dynamics which have been fixed for centuries because of all this. But Einstein ended up explaining them in far better ways and killed that all off, unfortunately. And I'm convinced that if Maxwell had been kicking around for long enough, that would not have been the case. So just taking that discussion a little bit further, I had to get a few notes on this to try and bring some context around the UAPs and actually look at the historical relationship between the two minds of physics at the time. So the kickoff point for Einstein, of course, as we know, was Einstein's equations. So he united electricity and magnetism, and this theme pervades Einstein's endeavours even to his last day, because he sought like a Maxwell-like unification with gravity, so a grand unified field. But he never found it, of course, which is an interesting point, and we wonder what would happen if Maxwell had stayed around. Now, Einstein wasn't actually that good at mathematics. He got a lot of help quantifying his concepts and ideas mathematically, whereas Maxwell was a mathematical genius, thus his quaternion notation. So, but perhaps he was just too hard to understand, and the mathematics was too daunting. So Einstein, of course, was German and knew that Hertz had already done the critical experiment to show that Maxwell was actually correct and that electromagnetic waves are light. But that didn't lead to Maxwell winning out with the electromagnetic universe. Well, he died actually. So we had Einstein winning out. So we have to build a new structure for physics based on Maxwell, of course. But I'm just wondering whether that actually happened fully, because we've lost a part of, or a key part of his notation that is connected to UAP and UFOs and how they might work and what space really is. I'll leave it at that for now. I'm going to go into I'm going to do quite a number of series on this and circle back around to UAP. So we'll quickly recap Maxwell again in the next episode, and then start bringing it back into focus with the research we've been doing on orbs and rods, and how this electromagnetism, electrogravitics, counter-spun rotation, capacitor induction, all seems to be linked back to more what Maxwell was trying to show alongside Einstein. So look forward to talking again soon.